What's up, guys? Welcome back to podcast episode number 14. Today, I have a guest with me who is a very special friend of mine as well. A little bit about our guest. Born in Jamaica and now residing in New York City, our guest is an experienced speaker, business strategist, and a tireless champion for fellow entrepreneurs. She engages her audience on entrepreneurship, on lifestyle of giving, and a range of topics for business ventures, speaking at universities and on podcasts and business forums. She is the founder and visionary for Bunchful Techologies, an enterprise that is all about giving and which aims to shine the spotlight on those who give back to the community. She also sits on the board of the New York chapter of New Executive Women in Hospitality as the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. In her spare time, she keeps abreast of philosophical concepts and is an avid writer, poet, traveler, and known by her personal motto, make a difference now. That being said, let me introduce our guest today, Raquel Miller. Hi, Raquel. How you doing?
Hello, Sid. Thank you for welcoming me to your podcast. I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Raquel. I want to personally thank you for giving us this opportunity, and we are excited and happy to have you here.
Certainly, such a wonderful introduction.
Thank you. Raquel, before we dive into the podcast, the subject of the podcast, would you mind taking a moment and telling our audience about your background?
Oh, yes, actually. Well, I am from the Caribbean. I am from Jamaica, and I grew up I started the first 10 years of my life. I lived in a small farming town in Jamaica. I lived with my grandparents, and those were blissful years, I have to say. When I look back at just the wonderful opportunity I had to be part of that smaller community. And I must say that those were the years that seeded my journey in giving back, in generosity, in giving, sharing what we have, sharing our own abundance with others. And in that small town, growing up with my grandparents and my grandmother, I remember she would wake me up early in the morning to go, give our uncle across the street his breakfast, because my mom provided all his meals. And I thought that he was our uncle, actually. She'd been taking care of him for so many years. And others in the community would also come and help. But it was really after he died that I realized that he was not my uncle, actually. And that it really, I remember the impact of hearing that, whoa, this person is not my family, not our blood, family. And that was a moment for me that I remember. I remember seeing him when we discovered him on his bed. That image is so planted in my memory. This person, early that morning, this person, he is bent halfway between his bed and the floor, and in a very crooked and very, stiff position. And so knowing that my grandmother had taken care of him for so long, had fed him, was really a very impactful thing for me, because this wasn't something that you're given so that you can get back. This was really given because there is no real possibility of that being returned. So, but life in Jamaica, in a small farming town, we had a lot of fun, a lot of playing, singing songs by the riverbank, on laundry days, and going to the Brocco to chop cane. My grandfather owned a cane field. But later on, I went to live with my father in the city, and so now I am living in the city, and this was devastating time for me. it was, I lost so much weight. I couldn't, I missed my grandmother. I was just kind of plucked out of the countryside and living with my father and my siblings, and and all of it was really really touched me in such a way that my parents, they were worried about me. Is she sick? What's happening? But when I witnessed my dad's generosity, the way he, and here in this large city, this wasn't about so much about community help, but my father being the somewhat of a patriarch and being, and sharing his wealth with the community at large, where it was, he was the primary source. That was another moment that I didn't realize until now that really impacted me. And so from there on to New York, I I went to school here studying English literature, philosophy, politics, history, all my favorite subjects. And I went to work on Capitol Hill. I went to work as an intern on Capitol Hill for an extended internship. Came back, went into corporate life. Started out at Bear Stearns, went countrywide. Just all these companies are gone now, by the way. But these were some of the experiences that helped shape my path right now. And so that is the long answer to your question. Tell me a bit about your background.
I mean, it's amazing. It's always good to know where you come from and the story behind, your growth. So let me ask you, Raquel, so what year did you move to New York City, and what transpired the move?
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you so well.
So I said, so what year did you move to New York City, and what transpired the move?
Well, okay. So when I first came to New York, early 90s, what really happened was my dad wanted me to go to medical school, and okay, I did not want to do that at all. And one weekend, he was away, he was traveling. My dad traveled a lot. And I took my passport and I came to New York.
Oh, wow.
I must say that, at the time, I landed in New York like everyone else, and I thought, wow, I have so much money. I had the equivalent of $75 US. Oh, wow. I had it all in Jamaican money, and I thought, wow, this is awesome. And I have a cousin who lives in Connecticut. And so she had a friend in New York, and she helped me I went to rent a room from her friend. And so that's it. I was in New York. Needless to say, my dad was furious.
Wow, you got some guts. I love that. You have some courage there, and as I mentioned, you are now the founder for Bunchful Technologies. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So basically, the mission of this company is to bring together a global community of givers via an innovative technology platform to show the transformative impact of a culture of giving. Two questions I have regarding this. Number one, how did you come up with this name, Bunchful, and what was the story behind starting your own firm?
So, great question. How did I come up with the name Bunchful? Well, I'll take partial credit for it. Early on in our development, I had a friend of mine and we were both engaged in the business, and we were looking for, a word that, had a sense of abundance, so how do you find such a word? I mean, there's the actual word abundance. And we were brainstorming. We had pages and pages of brainstorming ideas. And she mentioned the word. She said, well, how about bunch? And the moment I heard the word bunch, and this was a friend of mine, her name's Candace. And so we were actually working on the business together. So she was going to be coming on as a co-founder. And the moment she said the word bunch, I knew it. I said, absolutely. And then I added the suffix full so that it was bunchful, because I really wanted something that felt that it had growth and opportunity and love. And it was just, I said to her at the time, I said, this word is crunchy, if you can say that of a word. And so in founding the word bunchful, because it's not a word that exists in the dictionary, we also had to define what it meant. And so I gave it the definition. To be bunchful is to share your wealth and your abundance with others. And so that's what that's the underlying meaning behind the word bunchful. I'm so sorry. What was the second part of your question?
So the second part was, as you mentioned in your background, you started with in corporate ladder, and then you moved on to become an entrepreneur by founding this company. So what was the story behind that transformation from a corporate world to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. There is something. My last corporate job was actually with a company named Heartland, and we were in payroll and payments technology. And I was in a sales role, and I absolutely loved the company. I loved working for Heartland. I loved my colleagues, my manager. Everything was great. And yet there was a sense that even there, enjoying, the work and my career there, I felt something that was missing. Some part of myself that was not being expressed. And so it's that nagging feeling that I have other work to do and other work that's important that needs to get done. And so it's very distressing, because especially when you're in, when you're experiencing content, to then say, okay, I'm leaving this behind to go on this grand adventure that I have no idea where it's going to take. And it wasn't a journey that is a smooth ride. Entrepreneurship is a journey of the unknown into the unknown. And so as I began those steps, and I should say that really it started earlier. There was an earlier where I actually founded an arts organization, and we were doing well enough, but not. We were in the middle of the recession, and we just did not. We didn't raise enough funds for all the for the things that we needed to do, and that was itself, fairly scary. We had some great partnerships that we did accomplish, like partnering with National Geographic on, some theatrical productions, and and some pretty large institutions around New York City, Museo del Barrio, the Brooklyn Museum, and we actually filled the theater at the Brooklyn Museum. Almost filled the theater, I should say, at the Brooklyn Museum with our production ones. But it was very scary, actually, and it's standing on the shifting sand, and you're just not sure. And so I hightailed it back into corporate, right? And I went to work for Heartland. And being at Heartland, again, after a while, after the first, newness of it, that old feeling starts to creep in again. I should be there's something else that I'm meant to be doing. And so you must confront it. You must, I felt I could not, I had to explore where that was going.
Were you scared this time too?
I'm still scared.
How did you overcome that fear to go back to Heartland or any other company, and you just took a leap and you said, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it?
And now I don't even think of it as overcoming the fear,
Mm-hmm.
but really living through it and embracing the fear, stepping forward still and still keep going. Because anything that we choose, every choice that we make, there's always an alternative that may seem safer, that may seem better. But once we have that sense of purpose, that sense of, I know what I want and where I want to go, then you have to keep going. Because if not, then you end up with a with with a life of might have beens and wish that I had. And so come failure or success, once I knew what I wanted and where I wanted to go, uh, it was just a decision of, some days are more fearful than others. The opportunity is bigger than than the previous day, and embracing that and taking it one day at a time. That's the only way.
Very nice. It's a great advice for up and coming entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, Uh, So along with Bunchful, you are also a member board of directors at the NEWH, which is the New Executive Women in Hospitality, a premium networking resource for the hospitality industry. Can you elaborate a little bit on this venture as well?
Oh, yes. So I am the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity at the New Executive Women in Hospitality, commonly known as NEWH. And as the Director of Equity Inclusion, it is my goal to make sure that opportunities are there for others and that the doors are open for others to welcome those in who have sometimes perhaps felt marginalized, not invited, or invited but not included, or some those who want to express themselves, want to express their voice and be part of something that is even bigger than themselves, but sometimes just do not feel included. We're in an interesting time right now because we see our society is at large is going through a period of, I would say, a revolution in thought. The norms that were practiced in the past are no longer the standards by which we are setting for the future. And so we are right now living through this flux. And this flux, we see that also impacting politics and the general society and all of these things. That's because of this great change. And I think, going back to one of your earlier questions, I think that we are innately afraid of change. When we think of change, we think of losing something. And so the part of the upheavals that we're having right now is because of this change that we're going through, and not just change on one front, but change in all these different areas. And so it causes a lot of angst, and we see groups rising up against other groups, and because many groups who feel that what they have will be taken away from them, they fear that change.
So Raquel, being an entrepreneur myself also, I just want your input on this. So when you say change is scary, right? It's the fear of losing everything or anything, correct?
It's a fear of losing something.
Is that, do you think, is that the myth in the society, or because, once again, we are all judged. We always say, hey, don't judge us, but everyone or someone is always judging us,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
how we are, what we do, So do you think it's more of the impact of the judgmental society that puts this pressure on our mind as an entrepreneur? What will he say? What will they think? Well,
So to unpack that a little bit, I am wary of, I sometimes, when I say the word society, I say it with caution, because many times when we talk about society, we're talking about something that appears to be external from ourselves, as though we live in a glass house in the sky. But society is what we have internalized. It is what we have internalized and express as a group. And that is what society is. And so we are part of it. We are part of the making and the breaking of it. But, and so when I talk about the fear, the change, the fear of losing something, because sometimes we think that if I have this and you give it to someone else, then I no longer have it, and so I have lost. And many psychology, you'll read many psychology papers that talk about, this fear of losing something can be even greater than the hope of getting something. So the fear that I may lose this is stronger than the possibility that I may gain that over there, right? And so that drives.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Raquel.
Yeah. And that drives a lot of our actions. So going back to it as the director of equity and inclusion, my goal is to make that transition between, those who have a lot and those we want to invite to partake, to let them know that there will be enough for others to share, and that we can allow others to be part, and maybe through that even have something greater than what we currently have.
That's a great outlook you have. So going back to Bunchful, I know you have the Bunchful Awards coming up. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what's the purpose of that award? So they can understand better.
Oh, yes. And I should, we talked briefly about the technology behind Bunchful, and I'll talk about that momentarily.
Please.
But yes, but essentially, the Bunchful Awards were created out of a desire to shine the light, to recognize those exemplars among us who give back to their community, who give back to others. And so that we use that as a means of creating this new path into the future. So many people among us are givers. They give of themselves in so many ways. And I think that it's time that we recognize that on a larger scale. Going back to my grandmother in a small farming town in Jamaica, and the community that rallied around to give to each other, to give to the old man across the street, or the woman next door who, with her children, who doesn't have, the means and, opportunities, the whole community really working in sync together. That was such, those times, that the period of those years were so inspiring for me. But at the time, I wouldn't have used the word inspiring. I don't think I knew the word inspiring. But my day, when I woke up and, I was not an early riser, and I did not want to go with my grandmother across the street, right? But the way the community came together, my grandfather had a cane field, and he hired workers, and there were other families who also had their own plot of land, for cane, for farming cane, sugar and rum and that whole manufacture of it. And when the whole community went together, during harvest to do the work together. And as children at the time, I was too young, so I didn't actually do any work, but I was there playing, we helped to gather we helped to do some little part of the work. And it was such a community effort on a grand scale. And so I really wanted to create an organization that was able to recognize, not just giving on a individual level like my father did, but giving on a larger level, and to use that as the blueprint for going into this new future where we are. Well, we can never really escape the ever-present path, the ever-presence, right? But as we chart this new path forward, we wanted to shine the spotlight on those who give. So think of the frontline workers, that nurse who worked, all her shift and, still was able to do, to help her neighbor, or, we're looking at those exemplars who give, not just giving in terms of money, but time and effort and really a desire to help. But while we think that is also important, we also think that it's important to recognize large-scale giving for organizations that really impact, the community on a larger scale. We have large organizations who are giving, so we also wanted to recognize that.
So Raquel, I have a question just to understand this better. So does your company have a metric system to measure this, and is it quantifiable?
Oh, that's a great question. So this is actually a good segue into the technology that we have been developing. So we are currently developing the BE Bunchful platform, and the BE Bunchful platform is where companies get to showcase the philanthropy and social good they do all on one platform. We have a developing metric for giving companies our Bunchful seal then of how impactful their giving has been. And so
just like an accreditation, right? Just like
right,
okay.
Right. But the Bunchful platform itself will also be self-managed by organizations so that they can input their philanthropic work. The Bunchful seal is something that is an accreditation through us.
Okay.
And we are
and then on the back end, you guys. So when these companies, they input everything on the back end, your software can create a metric system like how to rank.
Yes.
Which one to rank 1 to 10, whatever the metrics you have.
Right. Yes.
So you're in the process of building that software.
Yes, we are.
Oh, I'm excited to see that. Yes. I would love to see that.
Tiny steps, but yes. And so at the Bunchful Awards, so let me also explain. The Bunchful Awards is actually made up of two distinct events. The first part of the event is really the summit. Our summit, the Future of Philanthropy Summit by Bunchful. And that opens on November 17, 2021. And we'll have organizations, we'll have speakers there who are talking about how their approach to philanthropy, what the future looks like for philanthropy. We'll have technologies being showcased there, that emerging technologies that are addressing the philanthropic community, and that's that will be of impact to them. We have an exciting lineup of speakers, I must say. One of our speakers is winner of the OBE Award, which is one of the highest civilian honors by the Queen of England.
Awesome.
Yes, and has himself been leading a project by His Royal Highness Prince Charles. And that's just one of our speakers, but we have a number of other speakers. The IRC, the International Rescue Committee, is our philanthropic beneficiary in this, and they will also be speaking. Organizations like that, the IRC had boots on the ground in Afghanistan, providing refuge and support to refugees, and sustenance and all those things, not just in the immediacy of what we saw happening, but also the aftercare and all the work that goes into that. So we're really an organization that recognizes giving on all levels.
I love it.
So the second part of the Bunchful Awards, yes, this is the fun part. So we're having the Bunchful ceremony, the Bunchful Awards ceremony on April 27, 2022, right here, live event in New York City, where we give out the honors from the winners of the award. And that will be followed by the Bunchful Ball, and that's where you have fun, come dance, get on your ball gown, your black tie, and come out and have a wonderful time. Just one quick note that I mentioned the winners of the Bunchful Awards, because we've actually opened up our nominations. So if you go to the bunchfulawards.com or bebunchful.com, you will see we have a nomination open for anyone to nominate either themselves or individuals whom they know who are just really generous people. So you can nominate someone, and our criteria have been set for eligibility criteria have been set by an independent committee made of international persons who formed our independent committee to create the criteria by which someone can win the Bunchful Awards.
Oh, wow. So that's good. Having an international committee keeps it unbiased and correct?
Not just that, it's, equity, it's inclusion, diversity, making sure that we have a committee that was representative of many different cultures. That's part of, our promise.
Wonderful. So I have a few more questions for you regarding entrepreneurship. As we all know, it can be a tough road. So in the difficult moments, how do you stay focused on moving forward and making progress?
How do you
having that $1 million smile you have?
How do you stay focused? As entrepreneurs, especially, when we have some, great ideas for how our company, should be, and then there's another shiny object. There's another shiny object, like, oh, I could do that as well. But that's part of the discipline also of being an entrepreneur, is being able to carry through an idea forward still, because we still, I am the person who is in the creative field, so I'm always, creating. But while I have projects that we are creating and that you will see coming out, we have some really, some very, grand projects that are on the way. What really helps is creating a roadmap for the delivery of your product and the delivery of your services. And when one thing will be launched, another, and then the flow and roadmap around that, making sure that it is in congruence with your overall vision, but also that there's a logical sequence to, why this first and that second and so on.
Okay, that's great. I always ask this question to any entrepreneurs out there. What do you consider to be success as an entrepreneur?
So sorry, your voice was low. I couldn't hear.
So I always ask this question to all the entrepreneurs I come across. What is the definition of success to you as an entrepreneur?
Huh. I think we ought to shift our focus from thinking that a win is only when something goes exactly the way we want. We must acknowledge other ways in which we win. And sometimes those things that we perceived as losses end up being the preparation for what is needed for something even bigger. You know, as an entrepreneur, for every one entrepreneur out there are 10 other people who wished that they had taken the first step. And for that entrepreneur who takes that second step, there's another 10 people. There are another 10 people who did not make that second step, and so on and so forth. And so as entrepreneurs, it's so easy. It's sometimes, you know, in the loneliness of being at the head of your company, in those quiet moments, you know, we only consider the day a success when we have that big win, when we have obtained that big client. But what we fail to recognize are those smaller successes, you know, sitting up and setting up your sales pipeline, taking the day to get that done correctly. Okay, that's an important success. You know, doing this other thing to engage with your audience. That's another. Those are all small successes, and it's not just the big. You know, I gained this big client, so then that's a success, because those other things make up or what form the greater success that you're going for.
I love your approach of baby steps towards the definition of success. So Raquel, now looking back from coming from a corporate world to be a very successful entrepreneur now, do you feel proud of yourself and your accomplishments?
I am immensely so. I am proud that I made the decision, but I keep making the decision every day. I make the decision to be an entrepreneur and to found this company and bring it to a certain level. And I make that decision every single day. You know, I think that being an entrepreneur is, it feels like a battle, because it feels like you're up against the world. You know, you have this thing inside you and you desperately want to share, and you want others to share in it and enjoy it and be part of it. And it feels sometimes like it's a battle, like how many demons you have to fight, both real and imagined. But making that decision to bring, because what you're really bringing to life is something that will help others, right? That is really, you know, some path that you've created for others to make someone's life easier. And, you know, continuing to make that decision every day and keep into that promise, it's very important. But I must say that many times it's not always easy to know what that it is that we want to bring to life. Many times we are living our lives in obscurity, not obscurity from others, but actually obscurity from ourselves. We do not know who we are, much less what we want. Other people's wishes imprint themselves on us before we know it, and we're then living someone else's life. So it takes work, because we we can't realize ourselves by living what someone else wants of us. So we have to go inside. I talked before about, society being, something that's been internalized by ourselves. So many norms, that we've made our own are not always our own wishes. So in order to understand ourselves, we must take that introspective turn. We must unlayer the cake. Keep going. Sit with yourself in quietude. Look at your interior design and understand it. And from that, you rise to act. You rise in the power of that knowledge, of knowing who you are, and then really knowing what you want. And the winds may come. In fact, the winds will come and blow you down. But you bend, you dance in the wind, and you just keep going.
What a great advice. What a great advice for upcoming entrepreneurs, which takes me to the last question. This was a great advice, maybe if you want to add something to it. What is your message and advice to the upcoming entrepreneurs watching this podcast?
Well, most of what I just said, but I think that especially from entrepreneurs who are currently in college, this is a great moment and a great time to go back to some of those professors who are in those areas that are of interest to you and get good advice. It's not always easy to discern what is a good advice and what is not, especially when you're, relatively young and just starting out. But once you have those good advisors, you'll start to, your own internal logic will kick in. And because a lot of times you may bring an idea to someone and, your friends, they just want to support you. And they say, yes, oh, that's great. That's great. But, whether or not that, that's what they really feel, may be up to interpretation. But going to those people in those areas of knowledge, whether it's your professors or others within your family or friends circle, having maybe someone introduce you to someone to help give you that advice that you need, that I think is having those good advisors is a good first start. But I must say, and this goes back to my earlier message, that what is right, what is the right way to go about a particular business must always come from inside you, because you're going to get many good advice and some of them not so good, and some advice that may take you one way or another in terms of the execution. But when you sit with all the answers from everyone, it must ultimately come from yourself. So you gather the knowledge and you lean on the experience that others have. But that moment of acting must actually come from you.
Wow, Raquel, I'm very blown away with with the depth of your thought process being an entrepreneur. It's really, I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Sid. I had a wonderful time here, and it was, such an interesting, conversation. So thank you for your time. And then lastly, I would just like to remind everyone to go to the bunchfulawards.com or BE Bunchful, BEBUNCHFUL.com, and join us on November 17. The tickets are complimentary for November 17. And then join us for the Bunchful Awards ceremony on April 27th.
Perfect. So I'm actually going to add this as well, information in the description of the video so people can see. Well, Raquel, I want to thank you very much. Same here. It was a blast having you, learning a lot of good points from you. And I hope, I actually wish you all the very success and fame, that you deserve. And if you ever need anything, we are always there for you. And this is it. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you an amazing weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sid.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Thank you. Bye bye.